1. He was considered the greatest living artist in his lifetime. 2. An Italian artist who wanted to deviate from the classical masters of Renaissance. 3. He was one of the most important painters of the Spanish Golden Age. 4. He is known as the ultimate Renaissance man because of his intellect, talent, and expression of values. And 5. An Italian painter and architect of the High Renaissance period admired for the clarity and ease of work. Now, let's see if your answers are correct. Please check your answers. Did you get a perfect score? Wow! Keep it up! Now, let's proceed to our main topic about the Baroque arts in the Philippines. Art forms in the Philippines are diverse. Western influences can be seen in Philippine art such as painting, dancing, weaving, sculpting, and pottery. In the 16th century, the Baroque style was carried by the Spanish and Portuguese to the Philippines, where it became the prominent style of building for large and small churches. Large Baroque churches often have a proportionally very wide facade which seems to stretch between the towers. During this time, the Spaniards used paintings as religious propagandas to spread Catholicism throughout the Philippines. These paintings, appearing mostly in church walls, featured religious figures in Catholic teachings. The pre-colonial architecture of the Philippines is consisted of nipa huts made from natural materials. However, there are some traces of large-scale construction before the Spaniards came. An example of this is the pre-colonial walled city of Manila, which was dismantled by the Spaniards and rebuilt as Intramuros with its houses, churches, and fortress after the Spanish colonization. During 300 years of Spanish colonization, the Philippine architecture was dominated by Spanish influences. Now, let's go over the Baroque architectures in the Philippines. So, we have here the San Agustin Church in Manila. The San Agustin Church is patterned after some of the magnificent temples built by the Augustinians in Mexico. The atmosphere is medieval since both church and monastery symbolize the majesty and equilibrium of the Spanish Golden Era. The massive structure of the church is highlighted by the symmetry and splendor of the interiors. Painted by two Italians, the profile of the moldings, rosettes, and sunken panels, which appear as three-dimensional carvings, a Baroque pulpit with native pineapple as motif, the grand pipe organ, the antechoir with a 16th century crucifix, the choir seats carved in Molave with ivory inlays, 17th century, and set of 16 huge and beautiful chandeliers from Paris. Next is the San Agustin Church in Paoay, Ilocos Norte. Paoay Church is the Philippines' primary example of a Spanish colonial earthquake Baroque architecture dubbed by Alicia Cositeng, an interpretation of the European Baroque adapted to the seismic condition of the country through the use of enormous buttresses on the sides and back of the building. Javanese architecture reminiscent of the Borobudur of Java can also be seen in the church wall and facade. Here are the giant buttresses that support the walls of Paoay Church. Next is the Santo Tomas de Villanueva Church in Miagao, Iloilo. The church's overall architectural style falls under the Baroque Romanesque style. Its ochre color is due to the materials used in constructing the church: adobe, egg, coral, and limestone. The church's foundation is 6 meters deep and the massive stone walls at 1.5 meters thick are intensified through the use of 4-meter thick setback buttresses as protection to the Moro invaders. According to the Royal Decree 111 of 1573, Law of the Indies. The facade of Miagao Church consists of an ornately decorated bas-relief in the middle of two huge watchtower belfries on each side. The bas-relief is a mix of medieval Spanish, Chinese, Muslim, and local traditions and elements, a unique characteristic of the church facade. The two huge unequal bell towers directly attached to the main church serves as watchtowers to defend the town against invasion of Moros. Now let's have the Baclayon Church in Bohol. The church, built out of coral stones, is a cross-shaped cruciform with its junctures surmounted by a pyramidal wall. The facade is designed with its upper half hidden by an extended choir loft which houses a 1,824 pipe organ. The walls of the church were decorated with icons of an angel's head and wings. Inside the church is a Baroque and neoclassical pulpit, the tribuna, a private area for the guests and visiting priests, a silver sanctuary lamp, and a traditional detail such as a sconce hanged on the crossing. And lastly, the Santa Maria Church in Santa Maria, Ilocos Sur. The Church of Our Lady of the Assumption in Santa Maria is situated in a hill surrounded by a defensive wall on all sides like a fortress. The church is reached by climbing an 80 If satisfied with artwork, take a photo of it and present to your teacher. Good luck! Now, let's move on to our wrap-up activity. Fill the statements below to complete the sentence. 1. The architecture of the Philippines was greatly influenced by the blank. 2. In the 1st century, paintings inside the churches were used as blank. 3. Examples of Baroque architectures in the Philippines are blank, 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 and blank. The Spanish colonization in the Philippines is by far the longest recorded in the history. During the 300 years of colonization, many of our practices, traditions, and culture was greatly influenced by the Spaniards. List down the positive and negative Spanish influence beliefs, practices, and traditions in the Philippines. How did these influences affect our lives? How are you going to deal with the positive and negative influences of the Spaniards? So, before we end this lesson, let's have our post-test. Choose the letter with the correct answer. You will only be given 5 seconds to answer the question. Number 1. They brought the Baroque style of arts in the Philippines. A. Americans and British. B. Chinese and Japanese. C. Greek and Romans. D. Spanish and Portuguese. The correct answer is letter D, Spanish and Portuguese. 2. The paintings inside the churches were used as, or to, A. Decoration and ornamentation of churches. B. Religious propaganda to spread Catholicism. C. Symbol and reminder of constant Catholic faith. D. Showcase the artistry of Spanish artists. The correct answer is B. Religious propaganda to spread Catholicism. 3. An example of pre-colonial structure built in Manila long before the Spaniards came to the Philippines. A. Intramuros. B. Church of Gesu. C. San Agustin Church. D. Manila City Hall. The correct answer is A. Intramuros. 4. The pre-colonial architecture of the Philippines consists of nipa hut made from A. Brick materials. B. Natural materials. C. Wood materials. D. Concrete materials. The correct answer is B. Natural materials. 5. Below are examples of churches with Baroque influence in the Philippines except A. Santo Tomas de Villanueva. B. San Agustin. C. Church of Gesu. D. Baclayon. The correct answer is C. Church of Gesu. So that's all for today's lesson. Thank you for listening.